Throughout the history of gaming, and yes, computing in general, no format has been as well-loved, respected, influential, or long-lasting as the Sega card. Nah, I'm just fucking with you. It's kind of funny how in the 80s, Nintendo and Sega mostly spent their time bumbling their way into people's homes. Both companies abandoned putting games on cartridges for a format they thought was the future, only to sheepishly hobble back to cartridges again when all was said and done. The Sega card, or as it was originally known, the My Card, that's like about the size of it. It was Sega's equivalent to the Famicom Disk System, in that they didn't know how quickly the format was going to be outpaced in terms of storage. Sega had it worse though, where a Famicom Disk System game could max out at 112K, Sega cards only ever reached 32K. Rewritable Sega cards were test marketed, but that never really happened. That gives the Disk System another leg up, because Nintendo actually got disc rewriters into stores where they stayed until 2003, for real. I mean, yeah, maybe both companies fumble, but at least Nintendo dug their heels in, and I can't see them doing anything like that now. What's the point of all this shit? I'm gonna look at all the Sega cards released in the US, and I'm gonna rank them. I say just the US, because in Japan, they did way more of these, and they tend to be pricey now. In Europe, they also did Bank Panic and Great Soccer and Hang On, but those are in the triple digits these days, so fuck that shit, especially for Great Soccer, which is around 280 last I checked. Seriously? Fuck you. And Hang On I already did. I mean, there's what, 7 of these? Yeah, 7. Let's just make this easy. I'm going to approach these in alphabetical order and then rank them as I go. Otherwise, you'd know what's what right away, and we can't have that. Unfortunately, that means starting with F-16 Fighting Falcon, a bed shitter, if ever there was one. The 80s were a dumping ground for military-themed flight sims. Accent on the dumb part. Then Top Gun struck gold, and suddenly the world was bludgeoned by them. Nexa and Sega's R&D2 joined forces to make things worse. Enter F-16 Fighting Falcon. You have to be a certain kind of dad to even give this fucker the time of day. If there's anything notable about it, one thing is it requires 2 controllers to wrangle its batshit control scheme. The other is, this game was coded kinda wonky. I think it's an MSX game barely ported to work on the Master System. It actually uses the Master System's backward compatibility with the SG-1000, rendering it incompatible with the power base converter for the Genesis/Mega Drive. And if you're one of those legendary goofballs trying to use analogs adapters in an OG Genesis, that won't do it either. As for the gameplay, I'm probably too out of my depth to acknowledge this because I'm not testosterone poisoned anymore. On a scale of 1 to 10, it's an F. Recommended for people who own sexy Tom Cruise posters only. With that being the first game, we're in the unenviable position of placing this both as the worst and best Sega card game, so let's hurry on to the next one before it's too late. Developed by Sega, published by Sega, and very loosely based on their 1982 arcade game Monster Bash, Ghost House is kinda awkward, but I'll allow it. You are Mick, some elven kid tasked with raiding what's either a backlot set from Goonies 2 or Dr. Chaos, fisting the fuck out of every Dracula that dares mess with you. Except the Draculas are pretty strong and annoying. If you have a key, you can open a coffin. If you kill the Dracula inside, you get a gem. Rack shit up from there. One thing that stands out straight away is how annoying most of the sounds are. The whack-ass fire breather guy won't stop hopping, and Mick himself has needlessly loud footprints. I didn't hate this as much as I probably should've. As rough around the edges as this was, you can tell there's a vague, elegant simplicity to it, which was necessary to fit it on a Sega card. I'm kind of finding out a lot of the card games are like this. Putting the world to rights, this one plops on top, mushing F-16 down to the bottom where it belongs. Or does it? My Hero, or Seishun Scandal as it's known in Japan, is a side-scrolling beat-em-up, one without the Z-axis movement, but honestly still a beat-em-up nonetheless. The box and manual copy put you up against a gang of seedy punks, but honestly, there's nothing wrong with being seedy, there's nothing wrong with being a punk. Your other mother and I love you just the way you are. As for the titular hero in question, this guy's a fucking clown. I have no clue what the arcade version of this was like, and I probably never will, but this is without a doubt one of the toughest, cheapest, most obnoxious games I've ever encountered. On-ground punching attacks rarely connect, and even if you want to cheese the game by sticking with jump kicks, the moment an enemy gets anywhere near the patch of ground you're landing on, you're toast. Just when you think you've got this under control, stupid obstacles get pitched at you. Horrific. To put it mildly, unless you're a collector, skip this. Maybe don't think about the prices either, cause holy shit, I feel stupid. So surprise, surprise, something actually manages to be worse than F-16 Fighting Falcon, and at least that game is like $8 at the exchange. Now, oops. It's not a pile, it's a ranking, it's a system. I have to... Anyway, let's get redundant. There's not much I can say about Spy vs. Spy that I hadn't said earlier on the channel, except if I were ranking Spy vs. Spy ports, this would be just under the Commodore version and above the NES one. I'm sorry, but it's probably up on top. At the very least, it punches above its weight in terms of the format. So next, put on your best Sky Getty cosplay, no one's gonna get that reference, and take a swing at the Master System's first attempt at recreating the joylessness of real tennis. Super Tennis was preceded by Champion Tennis for the SG-1000, a game that's very, bold, lots of neon on black. The NES tennis game is sort of basic in its imagery, and maybe even more so in terms of color palette. Super Tennis splits the difference, which makes sense considering the wider range of colors the Master System can spit out. It's pretty lush and well done for a super early 8-bit sports game. How does it play? Irresponsibly. It's far too easy to catch a boot in your ass, and getting the depth perception of the ball just right to connect with your racket feels off enough to elicit some anger. I went into this giving Super Tennis the benefit of the doubt, and it rewarded me by getting blacked out and doing a face plant into the punch bowl. Super Tennis lands squarely above F-16 Fighting Falcon, merely on the strength of not being either of the games ranked below it. Of all the games I'm covering today, Teddy Boy's price seems to fluctuate the most wildly. For a hot minute, every copy I saw on eBay was like over $40 until I fell ass backwards into a complete copy for like $8.50, so who knows. Teddy Boy, developed in-house, moves pretty quickly, and that's a lot of its charm. Not only that, but it gave me weird flashbacks to Flicky and Metal Storm. Originally named Teddy Boy Blues in Japan after the Yoko Ashino song, she and the song itself were eliminated from the American version, supposedly for legal reasons, but if that's the case, then why does the new music make a piece of candle in the wind? Gameplay is simple, and just shoot like crazy. Once you hit an enemy, they shrink into a little ball, sort of like something from a vending machine. If you touch them when they're like that, they'll die. Kill every enemy and the next stage begins. Simple enough to be a prime candidate for a Sega cart. Once you reach the third stage, these things with the teeth are brutal. Not only that, but if you stand in one place for too long, the floor breaks underneath you. Part of me wants to try to use that to my advantage, but these two things are too aggressive to even pull that off. Teddy Boy is one of those games where you keep thinking, okay, one more go, where the gameplay loop leans on a fairly good balance between arcade action and just barely getting your ass kicked. But it's slightly disconnected in a way. That difficulty doesn't increase until that third stage, meaning things don't grow in intensity till later on. If the game was a single stage where things got tougher and tougher, it'd be even better. That's not to say this approach can't work. Flicky handles it pretty well, but I just wish there was a little less delay to feeling addicted, you know? Teddy Boy rockets to second place. If you want to disqualify Spy vs. Spy, you can consider that number one for the time being. Lastly, Transbot, or as I call it, Bot, is the follow-up to the SG-1000 game Orgus. Both games ham-handedly mush bargain basement transformer mechanics into a horizontal shoot-'em-up, although at least Orgus is based on its own animated series. I haven't gotten Orgus yet, so I'm not even whining about it or singing its praises, but at least here's Transbot, aka Nuclear Creature, aka Astroflash. The weapon system here is equal parts clever and horseshit. Picking up a weapon capsule begins a series of letters cycling at the top of the screen, which you can stop with the button press. A, B, and D keep you in spaceship mode, with A being your default weapon. C, E, and F turn you into a robot, making you a far larger target. G not only powers up your weapon but restores your health, and D, which I already mentioned, is required to continue through the game. I'm not spoiling anything by telling you that, because you're going to be pissed without it. If you shoot these plus-shaped thingies, you'll continue underground. Weird, right? By now you might have noticed this doesn't have one-hit kills like a typical shoot-'em-up. You have a health meter. But in exchange, your special weapons have limited ammo. I have to admit, it kind of feels good to be hanging on by the skin of your teeth, especially using weapon C, then grabbing a G capsule at the last moment, refilling everything. Get far enough and you fight an ATST. No, really. That's it. Transbot is definitely hindered by the Sega card format. If the 32K it takes up was doubled, this could have been more like Section Z or whatever. Not only that, but Orgus was also 32K. If the previous iteration of the game on an older piece of hardware is identical in size, you've got a problem. Does it get by on charm? I don't know. That's up to you. You'll probably hate it. However, I was a sucker for it, and not just based on the name. All things considered, I spent the most time with this. It might be repetitive, but there's a ton to love about it if you show up with an open mind. It almost has that sort of... you know what you're getting based on the restriction of what you're playing it on, sort of like a really good Game Boy game that came out in the first 2 years of the Game Boy's life. That might not be something that you could have said at the time, but in retrospect, in 2021, it like, that's kind of how I'm looking at these games. You know what I mean? So, knowing what it wasn't capable of and did anyway, Transbot is number 2. So here we are. Spy vs. Spy takes the crown, followed by Transbot, Teddy Boy, Ghost House, Super Tennis, F-16 Fighting Fuckface, and lastly, the execrable My Hero. If I wanted to force a little more credibility into this, I would have played Bank Panic and Great Soccer and OpenMU and jammed those in here, but it's not like you buy them anyway unless you're the gaming budget of, like, a pop star mid-Imperial phase. So after putting this one off for a while, it's finally done, and if you want to see what's next, subscribe. You're allowed to again, like, comments are okay, I guess. I don't know, dude. Where would Hang On rank? Below Ghost House, but above Super Tennis. How's that? It's still gonna piss people off, but I just... Hang On is no F1 race. I could have said there was like some rule about if a game starts with F-1, then it automatically sucks, because there's other like F-16, F-18 games out there, but F1 race is fine. And there's probably other like F1 racing things. There's a lot of those for Game Boy Color. Smell you later. With that being the first game, we're in the unenviable... It's funny in hindsight... The Sega card, or as